Welcome into this edition of Tide and Tiger podcast. We are with Tiger Insider's creator, Rodney, or we call it a Rodcast. We're going to start doing these once a week and getting an update on Bama football. And he is Rodney Orr joining us now. Rod, how are you?
Man, I'm doing great, Scott. How are you?
Doing great. Is it okay to call it a Rodcast? I think that's kind of cool myself.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
All right. So you and I were at the scrimmage yesterday. We got to see our 7 minutes, and notice some things. So let's start there with what we notice. I kind of hung around the offensive line. I always look at the quarterbacks, receivers, running backs, and then you tell me what you noticed. But let me start with, I've noticed every time we get that look that there's a lot of quarterback to tight end action that I haven't seen before, just in throwing the football around. I think that's not a dead giveaway, but certainly Brian Daboll coming in is going to throw to the tight end.
Well, Scott, you look at his background, that's certainly something that they've done everywhere he's been. Of course, he was a tight ends coach with the New England Patriots, and, they've utilized the tight end quite a bit, obviously. And I think that's going to be a big part of this Alabama offense. And not only the tight ends, I think when you look at Brian Daboll and what he does, they're going to be very diverse. They're going to spread the ball around. They're going to use the tight ends. They're going to use the backs out of the backfield. They're going to line running backs up in the slot. I think we even noticed one time yesterday, Scott, as we were walking in, that in some of the things they were doing, they were lining tight ends up in the backfield along with a running back, and that was really interesting, and not sending them in motion. Those things are very interesting that they're doing. So I think it's going to be a very diverse offense, utilizing all the personnel, all the positions in different ways.
There's no doubt about it. And when you look at New England, because they talk about New England all the time, and for good reason. Obviously, he came over as the tight ends coach. But we have seen the Patriots, I've talked about this casually. We have seen the Patriots come out with traditional tight end and I formation. We have seen them with one back and 3 and 4 wides. We've seen them with no backs and 5 wides. We've seen Brady under center. We have seen Brady in the shotgun, and I think that's exactly what we'll see with Alabama, don't you?
I do. I think they'll utilize a lot of the things that New England has done. Now, not all. I don't think it's a complete overhaul of what they were doing. You have a quarterback, Jalen Hurts, that does some things obviously a lot different than what Tom Brady would do with his legs. So I think they're going to utilize Jalen Hurts' strengths, continue to do that, use him on zone read plays at times, and also have a lot of run-pass options. I think those are certainly going to be, part of the mix with what they're going to do. And back to your tight end comment a few minutes ago, Scott, I do think that when you look at these Alabama tight ends, I'm very high on this group as a whole. I mean, when you start, to me, with Irv Smith, the sophomore out of New Orleans, I think he's going to be the sleeper of the year in terms of people really don't know about him, haven't talked much about him. I've loved him since the day he signed with Alabama, committed to them on signing day 2 years ago, and he's really developing now as a sophomore. I think he's going to be a big weapon, as will several of the others, including Miller Forrestall, who did a fantastic job last year as a true freshman. I think Miller Forrestall is going to be a key in this particular season as well. And I think, too, when you look at Hale Hinches, he's been around a lot. He's a really good blocker. They've got 2 very good young tight ends, true freshmen. Major Tennyson went through spring practice. He's a good-looking, big physical kid. And I like Kedrick James a lot. I think he's a guy that brings a lot of versatility. He's 6'5", 272. He can line up and block. He can also, run routes, get down the field, has excellent hands, a guy that, could eventually become a defensive lineman. We'll see how it all works out. And I'll tell you a guy that's a sleeper to keep an eye on as an H-back type is Ronnie Clark.
Yes.
Of course, signed as a highly recruited player out of Calera a few years ago. He had a couple of Achilles tendon tears, and that really set him back. But, I know that the coaching staff is very, very high on Ronnie Clark and the things that he does, his work ethic. He's a big, strong, powerful guy. So I think you could see him also in the mix.
And I think you pointed out yesterday when we were walking through the tunnel, look at Clark in the backfield. And I said, the Patriots sometimes put tight ends in the backfield. Of course, as you said, he's played there too. So I think he can play anywhere. If they want to go fullback look, he's right there. He may be the man.
Absolutely. Guy that, again, he's a big physical guy. I think that he could be an outstanding blocker. as well. He has good hands. He's a good athlete. So it's great to see that they're finding a role for him. And because, again, he was a very, very highly touted player until those injuries.
As deep a tight end class as you've seen in totality, talent-wise?
I mean, here at Alabama, it's certainly very good. I would have to, really look back and think about that. But, yeah, there's a lot of talent, at that tight end position when you start looking at, again, the guys that we mentioned and the depth of it. When you've got a guy like a true freshman, Kedrick James, who is, if you look at him, I'm not saying he's fifth on the depth chart by any means, but, there's 5 or 6 guys there that, could potentially be outstanding players and contribute to this offense. So It's very deep, very talented. I like what they have. And again, back to what you said, I think Brian Daboll will utilize those guys.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Finally, the running backs, I noticed Bo Scarborough, who was held out of the scrimmage with a slight pull, but he was doing drills, so nothing to be concerned about for Bama fans there. I know Mosley was held out, Jamie Mosley, for sure. Vandarius Cowan was working through drills for folks that like the injury talk. Did you notice anything before we get into scrimmage when we were looking at the 7-minute open period as they prepared?
Well, Coach Saban talked about the injuries yesterday a little bit. Najee Harris, of course, did not participate.
Right.
Josh Jacobs has it. Both those guys have pulled hamstrings. So they were a little bit limited in terms of what they could do. They did not participate. They're guys that are expected to be back. Coach Saban said it may take a little bit longer for Jacobs, but Najee Harris is expected back for tomorrow's practice on Monday. And Jamie Mosley, as you mentioned, he's been out. Vandarius Cowan, the true freshman linebacker's had some minor back issues that have kind of, slowed him down the first week and a half or so. But other than that, I think, Scott, they're just bumped and bruised up a little bit, but nothing serious.
Hence the reason you have depth, for sure. All right, let's get on the inside information. It is TighterInsider.com, and you can go there and check out how to become a member and check out the member forums and all the different things there. But it is Insider for a reason. Let's start with we had a little tete-a-tete supposedly during this scrimmage. Rodney Harrison has done this in games before. I remember he got in a little shouting match with Eddie Jackson one year, a couple of years ago, and supposedly he had some mix-up with Calvin Ridley yesterday. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about that. I think sometimes what happens, and again, as we talked about yesterday, it was 95 degrees. It was really hot. I think that, the guys were out there really competing hard. Camp's starting to really heat up, so to speak. And I think sometimes what happens is in the midst of it all, guys get tangled up and, tempers flare occasionally. And I don't think it was anything serious, but it was certainly something that, Calvin Ridley was apparently, left. I don't know if he was dismissed from the scrimmage or told to leave or whatever, but apparently he did leave the scrimmage and eventually came back in street clothes and watched the rest of it. So, but other than details, I don't really know much other than that. But again, I don't think it's anything that's significant.
Well, we know Rodney Harris is an emotional player too, right? I mean, this isn't a surprise.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, this is what he is.
Coach Saban talked about that last year. When you're talking about the USC opener, when he kind of lost his cool a little bit, and he and Eddie got into it on the sideline when Eddie was trying to settle him down, and but he is an emotional player, and that's sometimes part of it.
He's also a NFL prospect too, so he's very, as is Calvin Ridley. All right, so let's get on the inside and start with the offensive side of the football. From all indications, it was a little rough from the rhythm standpoint from Brian Daboll's first time he's been out there in a scrimmage-like situation for the Tide.
Yeah, this fall, certainly.
This fall,
last spring, I think they did an outstanding job offensively. They really, did some promising things. And, as you look at going into the first scrimmage, I really think that Jeremy Pruitt, Nick Saban kind of turned the defense loose on the offense to see how they would respond. And, they threw everything at them from, what I gather. You saw, a lot of blitzes out there yesterday. And, of course, we didn't, again, want to be clear, we didn't see it firsthand. These are just, some things that we've picked up on. And so I think they really turned the defense loose. against a young offensive line that's still trying to shore up that right side. And when you talk about that, let's not forget now, Jonah Williams was a right tackle last year. He's moved to left tackle, so he's new at that position. So really, you have three guys at new positions, if you want to look at it like that, on this offensive line. So it'll take a little while to mesh. But, I think that's good news, to be honest with you, that the defense really kind of dominated the scrimmage, because I think, as most Alabama fans would agree, that, if your defense is ahead right now, then you're in pretty good shape, because defense has certainly been the thing that's won championships around here.
And this is normal, isn't it? I mean, Auburn's defense in their first scrimmage, they had their second yesterday, but, I remember them saying that Kevin Steele's defense was dominant. I would think that's normal for a first one, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think so. I think if your defense is going to be good, you certainly would want to be ahead of the offense right now. And the offense, there's so many different factors that go into that. And I just think it takes a little time to kind of smooth things out, get headed in the right direction. I would think that in this upcoming scrimmage on Saturday, this next Saturday, that the offense will do a much better job.
All right, so insiders say Rashaan Evans was a man. We have seen him line up on the edge, Rodney, and bring the funk. He's now moved to the inside. I think he's going to be a Swiss Army knife, and Pruitt will move him everywhere all over the field. But tell us what you know about the scrimmage he had.
Well, first of all, I'll say this. When Rashaan Evans was recruited out of Auburn High School, one of the reasons he picked Alabama was he knew it would give him the opportunity to develop as a linebacker. And that was the key, rather than just setting him on the edge and letting him rush the passer with his natural skills. He was developed into a linebacker. Now he understands all four of those linebacker positions, a guy that I think now is set to have a huge year for this Alabama defense. He's a leader. You can see he's focused. He's much more confident. You can see that just the way in his body language, the way he's moving. And even when he's talking in post-practice interviews, a few times we've had him already, you can tell that Rashaan is really excited about the season and really confident. Had a really big day from everybody we talked to yesterday. Stripped the ball from Miller Forstall and scooped it up and ran it in for a touchdown. Pressures, sacks, just all over the field. Now, again, one thing we have to keep in mind is that the defense has a leg up because it kind of knows what the offense is doing. They've been practicing against each other.
Sure.
So it does make it a little bit easier. So, but I do think that Rashaan Evans is having a fantastic opening to camp, and I think that he's preparing himself to really have a big year, and that's what Alabama's defense needs that from him.
What other guys stood out defensively for Alabama that you know of? And I know we said we'd start on the offensive side of the ball. We flip-flop, but let's just stay with defense real quickly. Who else there? And then did you get any reports on Trayvon Diggs, who, a lot of eyes, certainly mine, are over there on that side of the ball?
Well, I think that Trayvon Diggs at left corner trying to replace Marlon Humphrey, from all indications that I got, was that he had a really solid day at left corner, did a nice job, continues to progress really well. I think that when you look at him, he ran with the first group at that spot. Minkah Fitzpatrick was back at the safety. There's a possibility that you could see Minkah Fitzpatrick, who is at safety, slide down to that left corner spot. He's worked there some in the spring. He worked there some early in camp. He's been back and forth between the two positions. And if that were the case, they would slide Deontay Thompson, the redshirt sophomore from Texas, to safety, where he would fill in that spot left by Minkah. Now, I think they feel really comfortable right now with the progress being made by Trayvon Diggs. It's just a matter of, comfort level overall, how they fit together as a group. But right now, I think Trayvon Diggs, Scott, you asked about him, and I really think that, the coaches are extremely excited about his potential at that left corner spot. Some other guys that really shined defensively yesterday, if you remember the A-Day game when Terrell Hall made that interception of Tua Tagovailoa and ran it in 50 yards. Of course, he's Terrell Lewis now, but he had a very similar play, almost a replay of that in yesterday's scrimmage, where he did the same thing, ran it in for a touchdown. He had a big day. I tell you, a guy that really had an outstanding scrimmage from all indications as a pass rusher was Christian Miller. This is his opportunity. He's a little bit like Rashaan Evans. Christian and Rashawn both came out in the same recruiting class. They were 1-2 in terms of the outside linebackers in that particular class. And he had a really good day yesterday. He's up over 240 pounds now. So I think Christian Miller's ready to kind of bud and kind of take, some of that, some of the things that they lost with Ryan Anderson and Tim Williams departing. I think you're going to see Christian Miller pick up the slack as a pass rusher. On the defensive line, we've talked a lot about in the past how it's one of the question marks of this defense. I mean, you're talking about they've lost so many guys over the last 2 years. Last year, Jonathan Allen, Dalvin Tomlinson, two really key losses there. But Deron Payne's having just a great camp. He's a guy that I think's got a chance to be a dominant interior player. Isaiah Buggs, the junior college transfer, has been very, very disruptive. Deshaun Hand probably looks better than he's looked, in his career. I think he's set to have a really outstanding year. But it's some of the younger guys that I'm really kind of excited about. Raekwon Davis from Meridian, the sophomore, he's turning into a man-child. You're talking about a guy that's 6'6", 6'7", and about 305, 310 pounds, and he's really kind of starting to come into his own. Quentin Williams from right there in Winona up in the Birmingham area, he is a guy that I think is going to be an outstanding contributor as a redshirt freshman this year. Two true freshmen to really keep an eye on. Fadarian Mathis apparently had a very good day yesterday. I think he batted down several passes. He showed that he might be ready to contribute very quickly. LeBrian Ray, very highly regarded player that was signed in this past class out of Madison, James Clemens. I think that, he showed some flashes yesterday as well. He's a guy that's probably going to contribute. And I know Josh Frazier, he's been around a while. He's a senior. Somebody's going to have to give Deron Payne a breather. And Josh Frazier seems to have gotten serious. I understand he's lost, 20, 25 pounds. He's in better shape. He's a guy that's, I think, much more focused now, and he could certainly give a lot of good reps there. And also, even Jamar King, the junior college transfer from last year, who played limited snaps, this year he seems to be catching on a little bit. He's flashed a little bit in the last week or so, and he may be able to even give them some reps. So I think when you look at that defensive line, suddenly you think Carl Dunbar is doing a really good job of developing some of these guys and getting them in a position to where they can contribute this year in a good way, significant way.
And we're seeing Carl Dunbar, because I've had people tell me when all this happened with Bo Davis, that Carl Dunbar, nobody should be worried because that was the exact guy Bo Davis would call when he wanted some updates on technique or, hey, what can you help me with this? Dunbar was the guy. So he was the mentor to Bo Davis, and he is proving that right now the way the defensive line has developed last year and this year, isn't he?
Yeah. Bo obviously did a great job when he was here. 2 years ago, they had that great defensive line and they won the national championship. And, Carl Dunbar was, I don't want to say he was in a tough situation, but he was a late comer last year, came after spring practice. And I thought he did a fantastic job developing that defensive line. And I'm looking at how some of these guys now are starting to develop some of these younger players. I think it's really exciting the way he's bringing them along. And again, that was an area that I had a lot of concern about. And I'm not saying that, we know exactly how they're going to perform, but I think I'm starting to feel more comfortable with where they are.
Tiger Insider with Rodney Orr here on the Tide and Tiger podcast. We call it the Rodcast with Rodney Orr. Any more things to clean up defensively there? But we know that the start is good for them on that side of the ball, right? You want to move to offense?
Sure.
All right, let's move there because, again, that's where a lot of eyes are going with Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa. We've talked about the backs. What do we know that happened offensively yesterday?
Well, again, I think it was difficult on those quarterbacks because, again, you have an offensive line that's still a work in progress right now. You're trying to shore up that right side, and the defense, they turned them loose on both those quarterbacks. I think from all I've heard, I think Jalen showed his maturity over the past year, that all the things that he's learned, and he's obviously progressed significantly in how he's handling and managing things, and obviously did a fantastic job last year. But, I think that from all indications are that he was solid yesterday. It was a very difficult situation, a lot of pressure in terms of the defense getting in the backfield and pressuring him. But he did an outstanding job in terms of, not forcing the ball, throwing the ball away, pulling it down and running it when he had to. So he made some really good decisions. But again, it was very difficult on him. And Tua Tagovailoa apparently had a difficult day. I know that, if you look at the message boards, they talk about he threw a couple of interceptions. Maybe one wasn't his fault. But regardless, I think that what he learned was it's a lot different, than, high school football. I mean, they turned the defense loose on him probably for the first time, saw things that he had possibly never seen before against athletes that he's never competed against that level. So it's not unusual that, in that particular scrimmage that he would have a difficult time. I do think when you look at him, he's a guy that is going to continue to progress, and I bet he has a better scrimmage this coming Saturday.
Let's talk about the right side of the line, which is, I guess you would say, the weakest link, perhaps. They moved Jonah Williams to the left side, replacing Cam Robinson. Over there, you have Matt Womack and Lester Cotton. Well, what intel do we have on those guys and how they're performing over there?
Well, I think last year really probably helped Lester Cotton in terms of, just learning what it takes to, keep that spot at right guard. I think he's given an opportunity to continue to learn what his assignments are. And again, when you're talking about a guy locking on to somebody and blocking him, when he locks on, Scott, he's as powerful as anybody around. And I'm not just talking about at Alabama. I'm talking about probably anywhere. So the sky's the limit for Lester Cotton once, he feels really comfortable with what he's doing. And he's continuing to progress in that regard from all indications. And Matt Womack's just a really blue-collar guy. He's not as talented. He's not as gifted probably as Scott Lashley, who is working at the left tackle but has worked some at right tackle. He's not as gifted as Alex Leatherwood, the true freshman out of Pensacola, nor Jedrick Wills, the true freshman out of Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky. But he's a blue-collar guy, gives a lot of effort. He's worked really hard. Does a good job with his assignments. He's powerful. And again, when he locks on to somebody who's a run blocker, he's pretty good. Now, against a speed pass rusher, he may struggle a little bit, but again, he's a work in progress. And I tell you, I think Alex Leatherwood and Jedrick Wills, Coach Saban addressed this yesterday, said that he thought both of them could contribute. Talking to people, Scott, the feeling is that both of those guys are the real deal, that they're going to be outstanding players. It's just a matter of when. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see. But, I'd keep my eye on Jedrick Wills. He may eventually make a strong push for that right tackle spot. I don't necessarily think that right tackle spot will be settled, by the first game. It could roll into the first 2 or 3 games. We'll see how it goes.
Leatherwood, of course, for folks listening, 6'6", 322. He's the kid out of the Bay Area, Pensacola, Florida. They put out players still there. Jedrick Wills was the one that disappointed the Stoops boys up in Kentucky as he left that state, 6'5", 314. And he and Leatherwood were both very good friends in the recruiting process, went on recruiting trips together. I'm not so sure, Rodney, you would know the intel on that, it's interesting that both were 5-star guys and they came to the same school, They were that close.
Yeah, they really were. And, there's some discussion. I've heard things that, obviously Florida made a really strong late push for Alex Leatherwood right before he enrolled in late December. You remember he went through the practices for the bowl game, for the Washington game, and then also Clemson. But, obviously they made a really strong push for him. And supposedly Jedrick Wills was one of Alabama's best recruiters to kind of keep him on board. And so those guys have a really close bond, I think. And they're going to find spots for both of those guys eventually. I just don't know how quickly that will happen. But I think when you look at them, they're both very, very talented players and prospects.
In general, we know the next scrimmage is Saturday. To me, I would think just like first game to second game, first year to second year, can we say that your second scrimmage will tell you a lot more than the first scrimmage, especially offensively, facing this kind of defense? Is that your expectation?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I really think that the offense will probably have a better day, this coming Saturday. But you learn a lot. Again, it's your first time to see some of the things that you see, and very talented defensively. We didn't even touch on some of those guys, but they threw several guys with incredible, ability with speed and all of those things, and it was really difficult on the offense. And I think, this week, once they have an opportunity, the offensive side, to sit down, review it, go over it, the quarterbacks have a better feel for it. And again, too, Najee Harris was out. Josh Jacobs was out. Bo Scarborough was participated some, but was to a degree was limited. They didn't push him too hard. But again, I do think that what you said is true. I would expect that they would have a better day on this next Saturday.
All right, Alabama fans are not going to like this. The kicking game was abysmal. Couple of blocks. The ball didn't get off the ground good. This is not good. Now, I'm saying field goal kicking. From all indications, J.K. Scott was terrific punting, right?
Right. Yeah, Coach Saban actually said he was fantastic. I think the word was that he used. And, that's nothing new. We know how good he really is.
Yeah, I mean, that's expected.
Yeah, you expect that. And, so J.K. was outstanding in that role. But again, I do think that you have a new snapper. You're going to have a new holder. People forget about that. Cole Mazza's gone. Cooper Bateman has been the holder the last couple of years. So you've got the operation of it all, the timing, how they do it. You got a new kicker. All these guys working together, they're all new. So it takes some time. I know Joseph Belovas, the true freshman, there's been a lot of hope that he would be the guy that could step in and he's got a good solid leg and certainly be the guy that would take over that role from Adam Griffith. And he's probably struggled somewhat early making that transition. Again, it's not always unusual that would happen. You have a lot of new guys, and Andy Papanastos, who struggled in the A-Day game, as we saw. He's a guy that's got, from 35 in, if he's consistent, he could be a Jeremy Shelley type, maybe not quite as strong a leg or as much range as Jeremy had, who could probably go up to 40, 45 yards consistently. But hopefully Andy Papanastos, continues to progress. I think he did okay yesterday, showed some signs. And if worst comes to worst, then, he may be your real short range guy, and they may go J.K. Scott on the longer field goals who's done it before. He's got a powerful leg. So we could see that. But, again, I think it's a little bit early. I'd like to see how they progress and do next Saturday, and hopefully there'll be some progress.
It's certainly a concern, though, I would think.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, this is not
concern.
We're not glossing over this thing. It's a concern.
No, it's a concern. There's no question about that. That's one of the key concerns, right now on the team, I think, because you look at, hey, in 2011, it cost you the LSU game, the field goal kicking. In 2013, it cost you the Auburn game, missing several field goals. So it can certainly, change your season in a hurry. So, again, I think it's really important they get this shored up. And, as I laid out the options there, I don't know, Scott, here's what I don't know, okay? I don't know if when school starts and some other guys come in that want to walk on, if they won't have 3 or 4 kickers that might come in that group. And you never know. We've heard stories before. Guy shows up out of nowhere as a kicker and walks on and boom. So maybe that's too good to kind of be true. But I do think that's certainly an opportunity for a guy if he wanted to walk on. And when school starts and they bring in the walk-ons and other guys that, maybe they'll find a kicker in that group. Who knows?
Finally, it seems like the Louisiana contingent, where Nick Saban always goes and grabs a handful of players and leaves the state. Mm-hmm. These guys, according to your intel, went nuts in the scrimmage. And we're talking about talented guys. I mean, Dylan Moses will see time this year. Chris Allen, another 5-star linebacker. Fedarian Mathis, who we all remember recruited and gave his commitment at the graveside of his friend. Devonta Smith, the wide receiver. Isaiah Buggs, you've already talked about, who's a Louisiana native, coming the JUCO route. These are all impact, maybe all will play guys, right?
It's amazing. Back during the recruiting process, we started running a title on TI about, Alabama was gutting the state of Louisiana. And as I look at it now, sometimes you get some top players from a state and not all of them pan out. And I know it's really early to start making predictions on those guys, so I don't want to do that. But I will say this, early indications are this could be an unprecedented in terms of the quality of talent, just rating a single state like Alabama did. When you talk about those 5 guys, Isaiah Bugg's very disruptive on the defensive line. Dylan Moses went through spring practice. He's been, outstanding since day one. He's a guy that I expect to contribute this year. Chris Allen, also from Baton Rouge, as Dylan Moses is a native. He's a guy that yesterday flashed big time. I mean, there's a lot of excitement about him as a pass rusher on the edge. We mentioned Fedarian Mathis earlier. He batted down some balls in yesterday's practice. He may be ahead of where we thought he might be. Again, he was a guy that I was really high on in the recruiting process. I could tell he needed to lose some weight. And guess what? He came in about 25 pounds lighter than he was in high school. He's been outstanding early in camp, and he's showing that, he's ready to possibly contribute. So that was really big to hear about him batting down those balls yesterday. And then Devontae Smith on the offensive side, he made a couple of big plays in the scrimmage. He had a 60-plus yard touchdown reception on a tip ball. But he's a guy that really is very fluid. He's a natural receiver. The only question maybe for him is he's only about 165 or so. Yeah. I couldn't imagine that he's even 170. So you wonder, is he a guy that would only be able to play in obvious passing situations because, maybe he's not ready to help in the run game as a blocker. So that might be the only question I would have on him. But when you look at those 5 guys, Scott, those are all very high-quality players. I think they're all going to be outstanding contributors here, and probably most of them pretty soon.
My eyes go to the wide receiver groups pretty much every time I practice, and we throw in those names plus a Ruggs, Ridley leading them, then the veteran leadership of Cam Sims and Robert Foster, who are finally taking their roles real seriously. And then, hats off to Mike Loxley. I thought Billy Napier was an outstanding technique coach besides a great recruiter, as you know. Mike Loxley is proving to be an outstanding technique wide receiver coach, too. They are constantly, as you know, working on footwork, feints, head dabs, all kind of hard cuts that we're used to seeing from Bama receivers like Julio Jones and Amari Cooper and guys like that. So I've been very impressed with the work Loxley's done with these guys.
Yeah, I think Mike Loxley's an outstanding coach. He's got a lot of experience. He's been an offensive coordinator. He's been a head coach. He's done an outstanding job coaching receivers and other positions in his career. And not only that, he is, when you're talking about a really outstanding recruiter, I think that's one of his fortes is just being having a lot of connections in Florida, up along the Atlantic seaboard area, up in Washington, D.C., Baltimore, all up in that area. He's really well known and highly respected. So he's going to do an outstanding job as a receivers coach. And he is co-offensive coordinator as well. He's had some productive offenses. If you remember when Illinois under Ron Zook went to the Rose Bowl several years ago, it was Mike Loxley who recruited a lot of those key players on that Illinois team. So he's an outstanding recruiter. I will say this on the wide receivers, there's a lot of talent out there. They probably didn't have their best day yesterday overall. Again, the defense did an outstanding job, but all those guys you mentioned are really, really good. And I think when you look at the young freshman, Jerry Jeudy, you saw him in the 8A game. This guy is a superstar in bud. Henry Ruggs is very, very explosive, a guy that's probably going to contribute at the slot position, but also he could be a big, big factor as a punt return, kickoff return guy. Devontae Smith, he's shown a lot, as we talked about. Terrell Shavers is a big physical kid out of Texas, about 6'5", 210, that I think is eventually going to be a big target out there. Whether or not he can get in the mix this year, well, I don't know because it's kind of crowded, but maybe down the road. But he's a guy that brings a lot of potential as well. So they've got an outstanding young, wide receiver core that I think is going to, some of those guys are going to contribute this year.
As we wrap up now, we know the recruit numbers are not what Alabama fans are used to seeing. Alabama now in the top 30 as the numbers have risen, including a little a guy that can do everything, kind of a Swiss Army knife guy out of Louisiana. since you were talking about him, what can we expect this year? Because Ed Orgeron's been adamant about closing the doors and the walls of Louisiana. Can he do that and keep Alabama out?
Well, I think with that's certainly one of his goals. It's obviously, I don't think it's as big a year in that state right now. Alabama has a commitment from Slade Bolden of West Monroe, and I really like him. I think when you look at the way New England used some of their receivers, their little slot guys, Julian Edelman and so forth, I think Bolden's going to be one of those types of guys. He's a very, very good athlete, very quick, very shifty. He's got great balance, good speed. Came here to Alabama's camp. They liked him a lot. I think he's the kind of guy that you want, and is a high school quarterback, but moves around. Plays some at receiver, plays some at running back, very versatile. I like him a lot. LSU didn't recruit him really hard. They did not give him a quote-unquote committable offer, apparently. But, I think that it's a good pickup, really good pickup for Alabama. I like Slade Bolden. They're recruiting some other guys in that state. One of those would be Kelvin Joseph, who is committed to LSU. He's from Baton Rouge. He's a safety, a really outstanding player, has played some corner as well. People have been saying recently there was some talk that he may flip to Alabama, and then it kind of all quieted down. I still think he's got some interest in Alabama. I'd keep my eye open on Kelvin Joseph out of that state. And of course, people say who might be the next guy to commit. Well, you never really know when someone might pull the trigger. Obviously, Asa Martin, the running back from Decatur, is set to make a decision on. I think it's on August the 24th. Scott, I think Alabama's in really good position with Asa Martin. But we'll see. Things change. And Nadab Joseph is a really outstanding defensive back who had a big time camp at Alabama. He could play safety or corner. He's been committed to LSU. We said a few weeks ago on TigerInsider.com, watch out for Nadab Joseph. We thought he would decommit from LSU and eventually pick Alabama. Last week he decommitted from LSU. We think he will eventually commit to Alabama.
And for folks listening in, I talked to Asa Martin last week. And he told me a couple of weeks ago he was going to visit Clemson. He did, as you know, in the past. And his list was 3, Florida, Alabama, Auburn. Clemson's now on there, so it's 4. So we'll see. But you're right, August 24th at Decatur. We'll try to be on top of that. Rodney, we appreciate it. Let's do this once a week. I think fans will want to hear from you. We call it the Rodcast here, Tide and Tiger, right here. Also on TigerInsider.com. Be sure you message them. If you want more information, Rodney will be glad to talk to you about it. How can if people want to get in on the site and get behind the walls and everything, how can they reach you?
Yeah, Scott, it's TigerInsider.com. It's only $48 a year. They can get instant access with their credit card, or if they prefer, you can send a check, a money order, cash, however you want to pay. We have the avenue. But that gives you access to all of our premium information on the front page. It also gives you access to our forums where, I'm telling you, there's a constant flow. For example, yesterday after the scrimmage, there were people who had an opportunity to observe, and they posted a lot of really quality stuff and insight there. And it's only $48 a year. And if you prefer, you want to lurk for a little bit, you can go on the front page. We have a lot of video, a lot of audio interviews, Tiger Insider TV, of course, with me and Gary Harris. Our statewide TV show. You can watch that there, all for free.
Great stuff. Rodney, we'll do it again in a few days. Thanks a lot.
Look forward to it, Scott. Thanks.
That's Rodney Orr, Tiger Insider. Scott Griffin here, Tide and Tiger. We appreciate it. We're going to do this once a week, so keep it right here on Tide and Tiger. And, of course, TigerInsider.com. We'll talk to you again next week.